Welcome back to another late-night journey through the darker corners of human relationships. I am your host, Sleepless Miner, and tonight we're diving deep into Reddit stories that explore the messy, complicated world of toxic dynamics and broken trust. These are the tales that keep people awake at 3 a.m., typing furiously into the void, seeking validation for experiences that seem too strange to be real. Whether you're here because sleep won't come, or you're simply drawn to the raw honesty of strangers sharing their deepest wounds, settle in. Tonight's collection will take you through betrayals that cut to the bone and boundaries shattered beyond repair. I don't even know where to start with this. I'm 28F, married to my husband David, who's 31M. We've been together for 5 years, married for 2. Until 6 months ago, I thought we had a solid relationship. We rarely fought. We communicated well. We supported each other through everything. I genuinely believed we'd grow old together. Then his sister Emma died, and everything changed. Emma was 25, David's younger sister, and we were close. Not best friends or anything, but we got along really well. She was one of those people who just had this infectious energy. Always laughing, always planning some new adventure. David absolutely adored her. She was his baby sister, and he'd been protective of her their whole lives. The accident happened on a Tuesday morning in March. I'd stopped by their family house to return a cookbook I'd borrowed from Emma the week before. It was such a quick visit, maybe 10 minutes total. Emma was in her pajamas, making coffee in the kitchen, and we chatted briefly about a recipe I'd tried. Nothing significant, just normal, small talk. She seemed fine, maybe a little tired, but nothing unusual. I gave her the book, grabbed my umbrella that I'd left there the previous weekend, and headed to work. 3 hours later, David called me sobbing. Emma had fallen down the basement stairs. The paramedics said she'd hit her head on the concrete floor at the bottom and died almost instantly. Their parents had found her when they came home from their morning walk. The funeral was devastating. David was completely broken. He couldn't speak during the service, couldn't even stand at the graveside. I'd never seen him like that, and honestly, it scared me. But I figured grief affects everyone differently, and losing a sibling so young and so suddenly would destroy anyone. In the days after the funeral, David started asking me strange questions about my visit that morning. What exactly had Emma and I talked about? What was she wearing? How did she seem? Where were we standing in the kitchen? At first, I thought he was just trying to piece together Emma's final hours, maybe looking for some kind of closure or meaning. But the questions got more specific and more frequent. He'd ask me the same things over and over, then claim I was giving him different answers. He'd say things like, "Yesterday you said she was wearing the blue pajamas, but now you're saying they were gray." I'd try to explain that I honestly couldn't remember every tiny detail from a 10-minute conversation 6 months ago, but he'd get this look on his face like I was lying to him. The whole thing lasted about a week before I finally lost my temper and told him I was done being interrogated about my dead sister-in-law. He backed off after that, and I thought we were moving forward. He started seeing a grief counselor, went back to work, seemed to be healing. We had good days and bad days, which felt normal for someone processing such a huge loss. Last Friday night changed everything. We were at his parents' house for dinner, just the 4 of us. His mom had made Emma's favorite meal, lasagna with garlic bread, and we were sharing stories about her. It was actually a really nice evening. The first time in months that talking about Emma felt more celebratory than devastating. We were just finishing dessert when David put down his fork and looked directly at me across the table. "I know you killed her," he said, calm as if he was commenting on the weather. The words hit the table like a bomb. His parents and I just stared at him, waiting for the punchline or the explanation or something that would make this make sense. "What did you say?" His mother whispered. David's voice got stronger, more confident. "I said, I know Sarah killed Emma. I have proof." I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be my husband, the man I'd built a life with. accusing me of murdering his sister. David, what are you talking about? I managed to get out. That's when he launched into this elaborate theory he'd apparently been building for months. He claimed he'd found text messages between Emma and someone else. Messages that proved I'd discovered something terrible about Emma, something that would ruin her reputation or hurt the family. He said I'd gone to confront her that morning, that we'd fought, and that I'd pushed her down the basement stairs in anger. The level of detail was terrifying. He had timelines. He had motives. He had this entire narrative worked out. He talked about how I'd seemed nervous at the funeral, how I'd been too helpful in the weeks after Emma's death, how I'd avoided certain family gatherings because of my guilt. His parents were as shocked as I was. His father kept shaking his head and saying he didn't understand what was happening. His mother was crying, asking David to please stop, to think about what he was saying. But David was on a roll. He said the coroner's investigation had been inadequate, that he was going to petition to have the case reopened. He was going to take his evidence to the police and make sure I was arrested for murder. He said he'd been planning this for weeks, collecting evidence, building his case. The worst part was how rational he sounded. He wasn't ranting or screaming or acting obviously unstable. He was laying out his theory calmly and methodically, like he was presenting a business proposal. It made the whole thing even more chilling. I kept asking him about these mysterious text messages, begging him to show me what he'd found. But he just said I knew exactly what messages he was talking about and that playing dumb wouldn't work anymore. Here's the thing that's been eating at me ever since. I think David might actually believe what he's saying. There's a look in his eyes when he talks about this that I've never seen before. It's not the look of someone who's lying or trying to manipulate. It's the look of someone who's absolutely convinced they've uncovered a terrible truth. I've been staying at my sister's place since Friday night. David has called me dozens of times, but I can't bring myself to answer. His parents have reached out too, and they seem genuinely concerned about his mental state. His mother asked if David had been acting strangely lately, if I'd noticed any signs that he was struggling more than they realized. Looking back, there were some signs I dismissed as normal grief behavior. He'd been obsessing over the details of Emma's death for months. He'd created this elaborate timeline of her final day, mapping out where she was and when, trying to account for every hour. He'd been having trouble sleeping, often staying up all night reading about head injuries and stair falls and accident investigations. I thought he was just trying to make sense of a senseless tragedy. Now I'm wondering if he was building a case against me the entire time. The thing is, I genuinely loved Emma. She was going to be my sister-in-law forever, and I looked forward to watching her find someone special, maybe having kids, growing old together as a family. The idea that I would hurt her, let alone kill her, is so absurd that I can't even process it. But David has constructed this alternate reality where I'm a murderer, and he seems to be living in it completely. I don't know if this is what a nervous breakdown looks like, or if he's having some kind of psychotic episode, or if he's just so consumed by grief that he needs someone to blame and I'm the convenient target. His parents are talking about trying to get him into inpatient treatment, but you can't force an adult into therapy unless they're an immediate danger to themselves or others. And David isn't threatening to hurt himself or anyone else. He just believes, with absolute certainty, that his wife killed his sister. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should try to get him help, or protect myself, or both. I don't know if our marriage can survive this, even if he gets the treatment he clearly needs. How do you come back from your husband accusing you of murder in front of his family? I keep thinking about that morning in March, about how normal everything seemed. Emma making coffee, us chatting about nothing important, me grabbing my umbrella and heading off to what I thought was just another Tuesday. If I'd known it was the last time I'd ever see her, I would have hugged her goodbye. I would have told her I loved her. Instead, that brief, meaningless interaction has somehow become evidence in my husband's mind that I'm a killer. I don't know what David's endgame is here. I don't know if he actually plans to go to the police, or if this is all just part of his grief process that he needs to work through. But I can't live with someone who thinks I'm capable of murder, and I can't keep defending myself against accusations that make no sense. I'm scared of what he might do next, and I'm scared of what this is doing to his family. Most of all, I'm scared that the man I married is gone, replaced by someone I don't recognize at all. Sometimes grief transforms people into strangers. But our next story proves that strangers can be far more dangerous than we realize. I'm still trying to wrap my head around what happened 3 nights ago, and I'm hoping someone here can help me make sense of this absolute nightmare. I'm 29F, and I just moved into a new apartment about a month ago. I'm finally getting my life together after some rough years. Living alone with my 3 dogs, keeping to myself, working a decent job. I've been using my parents' address for mail delivery since I was a teenager because it's just easier, and they live about 20 minutes away in the next town over. I should probably mention that I haven't been in a serious relationship for about 6 months now. I'm perfectly fine being single, focusing on my career, enjoying my independence. My dating life is pretty much non-existent by choice, and I like it that way. 3 nights ago, I got a call from my parents at 2 a.m. that completely turned my world upside down. My stepdad was the one who called, and I could hear the stress in his voice immediately. He told me someone had been banging on their front door at 1 a.m., ringing the doorbell repeatedly, making enough noise to wake up half the neighborhood. My stepdad went downstairs and opened the door but kept the glass storm door closed and locked, which was smart. Standing on their porch was a man who looked to be in his 30s, wearing a black hoodie with the hood pulled up around his face. My stepdad said he couldn't make out any distinguishing features. No facial hair, no tattoos, nothing memorable except that he appeared to be Hispanic. Neither my stepdad nor my mom, who was watching from the upstairs window, recognized this person at all. Here's where it gets weird. The man said, and I quote, "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm looking for Rebecca." He used my full name, first and last. My stepdad played dumb and said, "Who?" The man repeated my full name again, and then said something that made my blood run cold. He said that my boyfriend was worried because I didn't come home that night, and that he was a friend of my boyfriend who was out looking for me. Remember, I don't have a boyfriend. I live alone, but it gets worse. My stepdad asked what boyfriend he was talking about, and the man gave him a name. Not just any name, but the name of a guy I dated briefly in 10th grade, nearly 20 years ago. I'm talking about a high school boyfriend from when I was 15 years old. This guy, let's call him Tony, has a very unique Italian name. I've never met anyone else with even a similar name, and I haven't had any contact with Tony in over a decade. The stranger repeated Tony's name several more times, making sure my stepdad heard him correctly. He kept saying that both he and Tony were very worried about me, that they were both out looking for me because I hadn't come home. He asked if my stepdad was sure I wasn't inside the house. At this point, my stepdad was completely weirded out and just closed and locked the door. But the man didn't leave. He lingered on their front porch for the next 10 minutes, smoking cigarettes and talking on his phone. My parents could see him through the window, just standing there like he owned the place. My parents called the police, but about 5 minutes before the cops arrived, the man walked down to the dead end of their street and drove away in a silver car. My stepdad couldn't get the license plate number because it was too dark and the car was too far away. When my parents told me this story over the phone, I was going nuts trying to figure out what the hell was happening. How would some random stranger know who I dated 20 years ago? What would be the point of making up such a specific, bizarre story? And why would anyone think I'd be at my parents' house in the middle of the night? The next day, I decided to reach out to Tony on Facebook. I found his profile easily enough, and I sent him a message explaining the whole situation. I told him about the stranger who'd shown up at my parents' house using his name, asking if he had any idea what this could be about. Tony responded pretty quickly, and he seemed just as confused as I was. He claimed he had no idea what was going on, said he definitely hadn't sent anyone to look for me, and that he hadn't even thought about me in years. He seemed genuinely bewildered by the whole thing, but something about his response felt off to me. Maybe it was just paranoia. But there was something about the way he wrote back that didn't sit right. He was almost too surprised, if that makes sense. I started doing some digging, And that's when things got really disturbing. I reached out to a few mutual friends from high school, people who might still be in contact with Tony, or who might have heard something about him recently. What I discovered made my stomach turn. Apparently, Tony has a history of being obsessive about ex-girlfriends. One of our mutual friends told me that about 5 years ago, Tony had gone through a really messy breakup with a girl he'd been dating for a while. After she broke up with him, he started showing up at her work, following her around town, sending her gifts she didn't want. But here's the really creepy part. Instead of confronting her directly, he started sending other people to check on her. He'd have friends drive by her house, ask mutual acquaintances about her dating life, even had someone call her workplace pretending to be doing a survey or something. There's something deeply unsettling about someone reaching into your past and using it as a weapon in the present. The fact that this stranger knew details from decades ago suggests either incredible dedication to stalking or someone from my past has been feeding him information. Either way, it's absolutely terrifying to realize that someone has been thinking about you, planning something, using knowledge they shouldn't have. I decided to dig deeper, and what I found made me realize this might be part of a much bigger pattern. I managed to track down 2 other girls who had dated Tony in high school or shortly after. Both of them had stories that were eerily similar to mine. One girl, let's call her Maria, told me that about 3 years ago, a man had shown up at her apartment complex late at night, claiming to be looking for her because Tony was worried about her. She hadn't talked to Tony in over 15 years at that point. The other girl, Jessica, had an even scarier experience. About a year ago, someone had called her work pretending to be from her doctor's office, asking to verify her address and contact information. When she called her actual doctor to follow up, they had no record of anyone calling on their behalf. A few days later, her neighbor mentioned seeing a man in a dark hoodie asking questions about her schedule and whether she lived alone. Both of these women had also reached out to Tony after their incidents, and he'd given them the same confused, innocent responses he'd given me. He claimed to have no idea what was happening, seemed shocked that anyone would use his name that way. But the pattern was becoming clear. Tony wasn't directly harassing his ex-girlfriends himself, which would leave him legally vulnerable and make him look like the obvious suspect. Instead, he was using other people, probably friends or acquaintances who owed him favors, or who he'd convinced with some sob story about needing to check on an ex for legitimate reasons. It's a clever system, really. The actual harassment is being done by people who can honestly claim they were just trying to help a friend. Tony maintains plausible deniability because he's not the one showing up or making the calls, and his victims are left dealing with strangers who disappear before police can investigate, with no direct connection to Tony himself. I filed a police report, but honestly, I'm not sure how much they can do. The man who showed up at my parents' house didn't actually threaten anyone or break any laws that I know of. He was just asking questions, even if those questions were creepy and inappropriate. And proving that Tony was behind it would be almost impossible unless one of his accomplices admitted to it. I've started taking precautions, though. I've changed my daily routines. I'm more aware of my surroundings, and I've asked my neighbors to keep an eye out for anyone suspicious hanging around my building. I've also blocked Tony on all social media and made sure my profiles are as private as possible. The worst part about all of this is the violation of trust and security. For 20 years, I thought that chapter of my life was closed. Tony was just some guy I dated briefly in high school, someone who existed in my past but had no connection to my present life. Now I have to wonder how long he's been keeping tabs on me, what other information he has about my life, and what his ultimate goal might be. I keep thinking about that night, about some stranger standing on my parents' porch at 1 a.m., smoking cigarettes and making phone calls while my elderly parents hid inside their own home. The level of entitlement and disregard for other people's safety and peace of mind is just staggering. I've warned the other girls I managed to contact, and we've all agreed to document any future incidents and share information with each other. If Tony is running some kind of systematic harassment campaign against his ex-girlfriends, we want to be prepared to prove it. The police suggested I consider getting a restraining order, But the problem is that I'd need to prove Tony was behind the incident, which I can't do definitively. All I have is a pattern of similar incidents and a gut feeling that he's orchestrating the whole thing. I'm posting this partly to get it off my chest, but also because I'm wondering if anyone else has dealt with something similar. Has anyone had an ex use other people to check up on them or harass them indirectly? How did you handle it? What kind of evidence would I need to build a case against someone who's being this careful to keep their hands clean? It's been 3 days now, and nothing else has happened. But I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over. Tony went to a lot of trouble to track down my parents' address and send someone there in the middle of the night. People don't usually go to those lengths for a one-time thing. I'm trying not to let this consume my life. But it's hard not to feel paranoid when you realize someone from your past has been watching you, planning something, and you have no idea what they want or how far they're willing to go to get it. When the past refuses to stay buried, it usually means someone is doing the digging. I'm 43 years old, and I honestly don't know how much more of this I can take. I've been married to Diana for 8 years, and we have 2 young kids, ages 3 and 5. For the past few years, I've felt like I'm drowning in responsibilities while my wife has completely checked out of our family life. Let me paint you a picture of what my typical day looks like. I wake up at 5:30 a.m. to get everything ready before our nanny arrives at 8. I get our oldest dressed and fed, make breakfast for everyone, pack lunches, and drop our 5-year-old at school. Then I come home and work my demanding job in project management, often juggling calls with teams across different time zones while trying to keep our 3-year-old entertained. Meanwhile, Diana doesn't wake up until 10 a.m. every single day. I know what you're thinking. Maybe she has depression. Maybe she's struggling with something I don't understand. Trust me, I've considered that. Diana was diagnosed with severe ADHD and what her doctor called postpartum depression after our second child was born. I was supportive. I found her therapists. I researched medications. I took on extra responsibilities so she could focus on getting better. But here's the thing that's killing me. I don't think she's trying to get better anymore. I think she's gotten comfortable with me handling everything. We hire a nanny Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. specifically to help Diana with our 3-year-old while our older child is at school. We also have Diana's mother living with us to provide additional support. Yet somehow, I'm still the one doing bedtime routines, weekend meals, doctor's appointments, school events, and basically all the parenting that happens outside of those nanny hours. When I get home from work, Diana is usually on the couch, scrolling through her phone or online shopping. She'll have been awake for maybe 6 or 7 hours at that point, with professional childcare help and her mother there, and she still acts like she's had the most exhausting day imaginable. I've tried talking to her about this so many times I've lost count. Every conversation follows the same pattern. I'll gently suggest that maybe she could take on some specific responsibility, like handling bedtime for our 3-year-old or making breakfast on weekends. She'll immediately get defensive and start listing all the ways her life is harder than mine. If I mention that I'm tired after a long day of work and parenting, she'll tell me that at least I get to leave the house and have adult conversations. If I say my feet hurt from being on them all day during a business trip, she'll say that's nothing compared to standing in the kitchen cooking while a toddler clings to her leg. If I try to express any frustration or stress about our situation, she'll one-up me with her own struggles and make me feel guilty for even bringing it up. But here's what really gets to me. She's not actually cooking or cleaning or dealing with a clinging toddler most of the day. She sleeps in while the nanny handles the morning routine. She naps in the afternoon while her mother plays with our son. She orders takeout for dinner more often than she cooks. Yet somehow, she's convinced herself and everyone else that she's overwhelmed and overworked. The breaking point came on Father's Day 3 weeks ago. We were having a family barbecue at my in-laws' house. Both sets of grandparents were there, Diana's sister and her family, about 12 people total. It was actually a really nice afternoon. The kids were playing in the yard, the adults were relaxing, and I was enjoying one of the rare occasions where I didn't feel like I was managing everything by myself. I was sitting at the picnic table, talking to my brother-in-law about our kids' school activities. I mentioned how I'd attended the Father's Day breakfast at our 5-year-old's school that morning, and how it was a little bittersweet seeing some of the kids sitting alone because their dads couldn't make it to the 8 a.m. event. That's when Diana, who was sitting across the table, laughed and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "It's not like you do anything anyway." I could have gone instead. The entire table went silent. My mother-in-law actually gasped. My father-in-law started shaking his head. Diana's sister looked mortified. Even the kids stopped playing for a moment because the adult conversation had gotten so awkward. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. This was Father's Day. I had just mentioned attending a school event that specifically celebrated fathers, and my wife's response was to publicly humiliate me by suggesting that my contribution to our family was so minimal that she could easily replace me. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to list everything I'd done that week alone. The soccer practices I'd driven to, the grocery shopping, the meal prep, the bedtime stories, the middle-of-the-night comfort when our 3-year-old had a nightmare. But I wasn't going to get into a fight with my wife in front of our families on Father's Day. So I just nodded, stood up, grabbed my keys, and left. I spent the next few hours driving around, eventually ending up at a bar where I sat alone and tried to process what had just happened. I kept thinking about all the times I'd supported Diana through her struggles, all the ways I'd tried to make her life easier, all the responsibilities I'd taken on without complaint, and this was how she saw my efforts, as nothing worth acknowledging. When I got home that evening, I was expecting an apology, or at least some acknowledgement that what she'd said was hurtful and inappropriate. Instead, Diana acted like I was the one who had ruined the day by leaving. She said I was being too sensitive, that she was just joking around, and that I'd embarrassed her by walking out in front of her family. She claimed that everyone knew she didn't really mean it, and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. But here's what really sealed it for me. The next morning, Diana woke up at her usual 10 a.m. and started her day exactly the same way she always does. She didn't offer to make breakfast or help with the morning routine or take our son to his swimming lesson. She just went back to her normal pattern of letting everyone else handle the responsibilities while she recovered from the exhaustion of sleeping 10 hours. That's when I realized that nothing was ever going to change. I've spent 3 years making excuses for Diana's behavior. I told myself she was dealing with mental health issues, that she needed time to adjust to being a mother, that once the kids got older, things would get better. I convinced myself that my job as her husband was to be patient and supportive while she figured things out. But watching her show no remorse for publicly humiliating me on Father's Day, then immediately return to her pattern of avoidance and entitlement, made me understand that this isn't about depression or ADHD or adjustment difficulties. This is about someone who has gotten comfortable with a living arrangement where other people handle all the unpleasant parts of life while she reaps the benefits of being married and having a family. I'm not asking for gratitude or praise for doing my share of the household and parenting work. I'm just asking for a partner who contributes something, anything, to our family's daily functioning. I'm asking for someone who doesn't treat my efforts as invisible and my struggles as less important than hers. The hardest part is that I still love her, or at least I love who she used to be. The woman I married was funny and energetic and full of life. She had goals and ambitions and wanted to build something meaningful together. I don't know when that person disappeared, but the woman living in my house now feels like a stranger who happens to share the same name. I've been seeing a therapist individually for the past 6 months, trying to figure out if I'm being unreasonable or if there's something I could be doing differently. My therapist has been helpful in validating my feelings, but she's also been clear that I can't fix this situation by myself. Both people in a marriage have to want to work on the problems, and Diana has shown no interest in acknowledging that problems exist. Last week, I contacted a divorce attorney, not because I've made a decision, but because I needed to understand what my options are. The consultation was eye-opening and depressing. Because Diana hasn't worked in years and because I've been the primary breadwinner, I'd likely be paying substantial alimony even though she's perfectly capable of working but chooses not to. But more than the financial concerns, I'm terrified about what divorce would mean for my kids. Right now, even though Diana isn't contributing much to their daily care. At least they have a stable home with both parents present. I'm worried that in a custody arrangement, they'd spend significant time in Diana's care without the support systems we currently have in place. At the same time, I can't keep modeling this kind of relationship for my children. I don't want my daughter to grow up thinking that wives don't need to contribute to household responsibilities, and I don't want my son to think that husbands should accept being treated as invisible and unappreciated. I'm at the point where I dread coming home from work because I know what I'll find. Diana on the couch, the day's responsibilities waiting for me to handle, and if I show any signs of stress or frustration, I'll be lectured about how much harder her life is than mine. I keep waiting for some sign that she misses the partnership we used to have, that she wants to be an active participant in the life we've built together. But every day that passes without change makes it clearer that she's perfectly content with the current arrangement. I don't know if I'm looking for advice or just validation that I'm not crazy for feeling this way. Maybe I just needed to write it all out to see the situation clearly. Either way, something has to change because I can't keep living like this. At least that father saw his wife's betrayal coming. Sometimes the cruelest revelations blindside us completely. I'm 24F, and I honestly don't know how I'm still functioning right now. My entire world just imploded in the most disgusting way possible, and I need to get this out before I completely lose my mind. I've been with my fiancé Ryan for 7 years. We started dating when I was 17 and he was 18, and everyone always said we were perfect together. He's always been kind, funny, charming, the whole package. I genuinely thought I'd hit the lottery with him. We got engaged 6 months ago, and I was planning what I thought would be the happiest day of my life. I'm also incredibly close with my mom. It's always been just the two of us against the world since my dad died in a car accident when I was little. We joke that we're like the real-life version of Lorelai and Rory from Gilmore Girls. She's my best friend, my confidant, the person I call when anything good or bad happens in my life. About 4 years ago, my mom dropped a bombshell on me. She told me she was pregnant, which was absolutely shocking since she was 42 and had been single for a while. I knew she'd been dating someone casually, but I'd never met the guy and didn't think it was serious. She was terrified about having a baby at her age, worried about the health risks, the financial strain, everything. I stepped up immediately. I told her I'd help however I could, that we'd figure it out together like we always did. When my little brother Jake was born, I fell in love with him instantly. I've been like a second mom to him since day one, helping with feedings, diaper changes, taking him to the park, reading bedtime stories. Ryan was amazing too, always offering to babysit, taking Jake out for ice cream, teaching him to throw a ball. I thought it was so sweet how naturally he took to being like a big brother figure. Fast forward to last weekend. Ryan wasn't home because he was out with friends, and I was planning to spend the evening binge-watching Netflix. My laptop died about an hour in, and I was too lazy to get my charger, so I grabbed Ryan's iPad instead. I know his password. We've never been secretive about our devices. When I opened the iPad, I saw a bunch of message notifications that had been piling up since he apparently hadn't used it in a while. I was just going to close them, but something caught my eye. There was a text thread with a contact that wasn't saved under a name, just a phone number. But I recognized that number. It was my mom's. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the messages. What I read made my blood turn to ice. My mom was texting Ryan about feeling guilty, saying that I deserved to know the truth. Ryan was responding that he felt guilty too, but couldn't bear to lose me. Then my mom wrote something that made me physically sick. She said it wasn't fair to Jake to never know his real father, and asked Ryan how he could stand having his son around, acting like an uncle instead of a dad. I read that message about 5 times before it sank in. Jake isn't my little brother. Jake is Ryan's son. I started scrolling through their conversation history, and there were photos. Pictures of Jake as a newborn. Photos of my mom when she was pregnant. Pictures of Jake's first steps, first words, birthdays. all sent between Ryan and my mom, like proud parents sharing memories of their child. The timeline started making horrible sense. 4 years ago, when my mom got pregnant, Ryan and I had been together for 3 years. I remember that period now with completely different eyes. There was a stretch where Ryan seemed distant, where he was working late more often, where something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I remember my mom going through a weird phase too, being emotional and secretive in ways that seemed extreme even for an unexpected pregnancy. I sat there staring at that iPad for I don't know how long, trying to process what I was seeing. My fiancé and my mother had been having an affair. The little boy I'd been helping to raise, the child I loved like my own brother, was actually my fiancé's son. Every conversation we'd had about our future kids, every time we talked about Jake being the ring bearer at our wedding, every family photo we'd taken together had been built on this massive lie. When Ryan came home around 11:30, I was still sitting on the couch holding his iPad. I couldn't even look at him. I just handed him the device with their conversation open and watched his face go completely white. He tried to deny it at first, then tried to minimize it, then finally broke down and admitted everything. He said it had started during a period when we were going through a rough patch in our relationship. He said my mom had been feeling lonely, that one thing led to another, that it was just physical and didn't mean anything. But it wasn't just a one-time mistake. They'd been sleeping together for months. Even after my mom got pregnant, even after Jake was born, they continued their relationship for a while before guilt finally made them stop. The worst part is how they've both been lying to my face every single day for 4 years. Every time my mom talked about Jake's father being some deadbeat who wanted nothing to do with his son, she was lying. Every time Ryan played with Jake at family gatherings, acting like a caring family friend, he was pretending not to be his father. Every conversation I've had with my mom about Ryan, every piece of relationship advice she's given me, every time she's told me how lucky I am to have him, she's been talking about the man she was sleeping with behind my back. I keep thinking about all the times I've babysat Jake while my mom went on mysterious dates that never seemed to lead anywhere. All the times Ryan volunteered to watch Jake so I could go out with friends. All the moments I thought were examples of how caring and family-oriented my fiancé was, when really he was just spending time with his secret son. The betrayal from both of them is beyond anything I could have imagined. My mom gave birth to her affair baby and let me help raise him while lying about his paternity. Ryan has been planning to marry me while hiding the fact that he has a child with my mother. They've both been living these double lives, attending family dinners together, celebrating holidays, watching me bond with Jake, knowing the truth the entire time. When I confronted my mom the next day, she had the audacity to act like I was overreacting. She said it was complicated, that they never meant for it to happen, that they ended things years ago and were just trying to protect me. She claimed they were planning to tell me someday, when the time was right, as if there's ever a right time to learn that your fiancé is your baby brother's father. Ryan keeps calling and texting, begging me to talk to him, saying we can work through this. He wants to explain his side of the story, to make me understand how sorry he is, how much he loves me and never wanted to hurt me. But I can't even look at him without feeling sick. I've moved in with a friend for now because I can't be around either of them. The hardest part is that I'm losing Jake too. I love that little boy so much, and now every time I see him, I'm reminded of the most devastating betrayal of my life. He's innocent in all of this, but I don't know how to separate my feelings about what his parents did from my relationship with him. I keep thinking about our wedding planning, about the venue we booked, the dress I bought, the guest list we made. Ryan's parents are on that list, and now I'm wondering if they know. My extended family is on that list, and I have no idea how many people have been keeping this secret from me. My entire sense of reality has been shattered. The man I was going to marry has been living a lie for our entire relationship. The mother I trusted completely has been betraying me in the worst possible way. The family structure I thought I knew is completely different from what I believed. I don't know how to move forward from this. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust anyone again. after the two most important people in my life conspired to deceive me for years. I don't know how to explain to people why my engagement is suddenly off, why I'm not speaking to my mother, why I can't be around my little brother anymore. Everyone keeps asking me what happened, and I don't even know where to start. How do you tell people that your fiancé and your mother had an affair that produced your brother? How do you explain that your entire family dynamic was built on lies and betrayal? I'm 24 years old, and I feel like my life is over before it really started. I thought I knew who I was, where I came from, where I was going. Now I don't know anything for certain except that the people I loved most in the world thought I was stupid enough to never figure out their secret. Family bonds can be more fragile than we think, especially when they're built on lies. I'm 48M, and I've been dating Kelly, who's 50F, for almost 2 years now. We're currently on what was supposed to be a relaxing family vacation, but it's turned into one of the most uncomfortable situations I've ever experienced. I need some outside perspective because I honestly don't know if I'm overreacting or if what I witnessed was as disturbing as it felt. Some background that's relevant here. I've known Kelly's son Ryan for nearly a decade. He's 23 now, but I was actually his high school football coach when he was a teenager. We developed a really close relationship during those years, and he's honestly like a son to me. When Kelly and I started dating, it felt natural because Ryan and I already had such a strong bond. Ryan has been with his girlfriend Emily since high school. They're both 23 now. They live together and have been in a committed relationship for about 8 years. Emily is a sweet girl, maybe a little alternative with her style, but she's clearly devoted to Ryan and he's crazy about her. They complement each other really well. We decided to take a family vacation together to the coast, along with my sister, her husband, my niece, and her boyfriend. It was supposed to be a fun week for everyone to relax and bond as an extended family. When we were planning the trip, Kelly made a comment that I initially thought was a joke. She said that Ryan and Emily wouldn't be allowed to share a room. I actually laughed because I figured she was being sarcastic. These are two adults who have been living together for years, who are in a committed long-term relationship. The idea that they'd need to sleep in separate rooms seemed absurd, but when we were checking into the hotel and I was handing out key cards, Kelly reminded me of her rule. I realized she was completely serious. Rather than argue about it in the hotel lobby with everyone watching, I just went along with the room arrangements. Ryan would technically share with my niece's boyfriend, and Emily would room with my niece. I figured they were adults and would work it out however they wanted once we were settled in. Sure enough, within an hour, Ryan and Emily had swapped keys and were staying together, which seemed perfectly reasonable to everyone except Kelly. The first few days of the vacation were great. Everyone was getting along. We were doing typical beach activities, having family dinners, just enjoying each other's company. But I started noticing that Kelly was being cold toward Emily in subtle ways. Not outright rude, but definitely not warm or welcoming either. Then came the incident that changed everything. On our 4th day, Ryan had apparently left his wallet in our room the night before. Instead of knocking on his door or calling him or even asking me to return it, Kelly decided to use the spare key to let herself into Ryan's room unannounced. What she found was Ryan and Emily in bed together. They weren't having sex, from what Kelly described to me later. They were cuddling, both partially undressed, and Ryan was gently running his fingers along Emily's back. Basically, they looked like a couple who had just been intimate and were enjoying some quiet, tender moments together. Kelly's reaction was immediate and extreme. She started hyperventilating, left the room quickly, and refused to come down to breakfast with the rest of us. When I found her back in our room, she was in full panic mode, talking about how inappropriate and disgusting what she'd seen was. I tried to calm her down and put things in perspective. I pointed out that she'd walked into the room of two adults who are in a committed relationship without permission or warning. I said she should be grateful that all she saw was some post-intimacy, cuddling rather than walking in on the actual act. That comment made her even more upset. She started ranting about how Ryan was still her baby, how Emily was corrupting him, how seeing them together like that was traumatic for her as his mother. Watching a parent struggle with their adult child's sexuality and independence can be painful, but when that struggle becomes about control rather than concern, it crosses into something much darker. Kelly wasn't upset because she was worried about Ryan's well-being or safety. She was upset because she couldn't handle the reality that her adult son has a sexual relationship with someone who isn't her. I tried to explain that Ryan is 23 years old, that he's been with Emily for 8 years, that they live together and are essentially a married couple in everything but name. I reminded her that we all knew they were sexually active and that her walking in on them was her own fault for entering their room without permission. But Kelly wasn't hearing any of it. She kept referring to Ryan as just a child and talking about how Emily had seduced him. She seemed genuinely unable to process that Ryan is a fully grown man who makes his own decisions about his relationships and his body. What really disturbed me was the possessive way she talked about Ryan throughout this conversation. She kept saying things like, "my baby," and "no one knows him like I do," and "he'll always need his mother most." There was something almost jealous in the way she talked about Emily, like Emily was a romantic rival rather than her son's girlfriend. I started thinking about other interactions I'd witnessed between Kelly and Ryan over the past 2 years. How she always insisted on sitting next to him at family dinners, even when that meant Emily had to sit across the table. How she'd interrupt conversations between Ryan and Emily to demand Ryan's attention for something trivial. How she'd make comments about how Emily monopolized Ryan's time, as if a man spending time with his girlfriend was somehow inappropriate. I realized that Kelly's objection to Ryan and Emily sharing a room wasn't about moral concerns or family values. It was about control. She wanted to be able to dictate the terms of her adult son's relationship, to maintain some kind of authority over his most intimate decisions. The rest of the vacation was tense and uncomfortable. Kelly barely spoke to Emily, would make passive-aggressive comments about some people not respecting family boundaries, and generally created an atmosphere where everyone felt like they were walking on eggshells. Emily, to her credit, tried to smooth things over. She apologized to Kelly for the awkward situation, even though she had done absolutely nothing wrong. She tried to include Kelly in conversations and activities, despite Kelly's obvious hostility toward her. Ryan was caught in the middle, trying to maintain peace with his mother, while also standing up for his girlfriend. I could see how much the situation was stressing him out, how he felt torn between loyalty to his mother and loyalty to the woman he loves. On our last night, I had a long conversation with Ryan about the situation. I told him that his mother's behavior toward Emily wasn't normal or healthy, that the level of control she was trying to maintain over his personal life was inappropriate for someone his age. Ryan admitted that this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. He said Kelly had always been possessive and jealous of his relationships, but that it had gotten worse as he and Emily became more serious. He told me that Kelly had made comments about how Emily was stealing him from the family, how their relationship was unhealthy because they spent too much time together. He also shared something that really disturbed me. He said that when he and Emily had first started talking about moving in together, Kelly had tried to convince him to move back home instead. She'd offered to convert the basement into an apartment for him, to do his laundry and cooking, essentially to treat him like a child, so he wouldn't need to become independent with Emily. I realized that Kelly's reaction to walking in on Ryan and Emily wasn't really about what she'd seen in that moment. It was about her inability to accept that her son is an adult man with his own life, his own relationships, and his own sexuality. She wanted to maintain the kind of control over Ryan that might be appropriate for a teenage son, but was completely inappropriate for a 23-year-old adult. The drive home was awkward and quiet. Kelly barely spoke to anyone except to make occasional comments about how some people had ruined the vacation for everyone else. Emily looked miserable. Ryan looked stressed. And I felt like I was seeing Kelly in a completely different light. Since we've been back, I've been doing some research about unhealthy parent-child relationships. And what I've learned has been eye-opening. Kelly's behavior toward Ryan shows signs of what psychologists call emotional incest or covert incest. It's when a parent treats their child more like a romantic partner than a child, becoming jealous of the child's other relationships and trying to maintain inappropriate control over their personal life. I'm still processing all of this, but I know that Kelly's reaction to Ryan and Emily's relationship isn't something I can ignore or excuse. If we're going to have a future together, she needs to recognize that her behavior toward her adult son is unhealthy and get professional help to address it. Sometimes the most toxic relationships hide behind the word family. I'm 36F, and I honestly don't know if I'm being completely unreasonable or if I'm finally standing up for myself after years of being taken advantage of. My husband Paul is 37M, and we've been together for 16 years total, married for just over a year. We'd been talking about starting a family, and I made the decision to quit my high-powered job in consulting to become a stay-at-home mom when the time came. Let me give you some context about our situation. I had a really demanding career that required constant travel and 60-hour weeks, but I was successful and well compensated. Paul worked in middle management at a tech company. Decent salary, but nothing spectacular. We'd always talked about how when we had kids, it would make more sense for me to stay home since my job was less flexible and more stressful. About 4 months ago, Paul lost his job. It wasn't performance-related. His whole department got eliminated during a corporate restructuring. I was supportive and told him to take some time to decompress before jumping back into the job search. He'd been stressed about work for months before the layoff, so I figured a break would actually be good for him. Here's where things started going sideways. Instead of using this time to rest and then start looking for new opportunities, Paul basically decided he was on permanent vacation. He'd sleep until 11 a.m., spend his days playing video games, hanging out with friends who were also unemployed, basically treating our house like a resort where all his needs were magically taken care of. At first, I was patient. I know losing a job can be a blow to your ego and your sense of purpose. I kept encouraging him to take care of himself, to do whatever he needed to process this transition. But weeks went by with no job applications, no networking, no effort whatsoever to find new employment. Meanwhile, I was getting increasingly frustrated watching our savings account drain while Paul acted like he was on sabbatical. I suggested that maybe I should go back to work temporarily while he figured out his next move. I could probably get freelance projects pretty easily, or even return to my old company if needed. That's when Paul dropped the bombshell that completely changed how I saw our situation. He said he didn't want me to go back to work because he needed time to be completely free and figure out what he wanted to do with his life. He didn't want the pressure of me working and him staying home with hypothetical future children. He wanted to be free from all responsibilities while he explored his options. I was stunned. We were burning through our emergency fund, we had a mortgage and bills to pay, and his solution was for both of us to be unemployed so he could have maximum freedom to soul search. I told him that wasn't financially realistic, that one of us needed to be earning money. I suggested that if he wanted to take an extended break from traditional employment, he could become a house husband and handle all the domestic responsibilities while I returned to work. Paul rejected that idea completely. He said he wasn't ready to take on household management, that he needed his mental space to be clear so he could think about his future career path. Basically, he wanted to be supported financially while contributing absolutely nothing to our household. Against my better judgment, I gave him another month. I picked up some freelance projects to bring in some income, but I also ended up handling all the cooking, cleaning, bill paying, and household maintenance, while Paul continued his extended vacation from adult responsibilities. The breaking point came about 6 weeks ago. I'd had a particularly stressful week, juggling multiple client deadlines, and I came home exhausted on Friday evening to find Paul and 3 of his unemployed friends having what was essentially a party in our living room. They'd ordered expensive takeout on our credit card, were drinking our alcohol, and had made a complete mess of the house. When I asked Paul what was going on, he said his friends were also going through tough times with job loss and relationship issues, so he'd invited them over to support each other. They'd been there since noon, basically throwing a pity party while I was working to keep our household afloat. I lost it. I told his friends they needed to leave immediately, and I had a massive fight with Paul about his complete abdication of adult responsibilities. I said if he wanted to be unemployed, fine, but he needed to contribute something to our partnership. He could manage our household, handle domestic tasks, do something productive with his time instead of treating every day like a weekend. Paul got defensive and accused me of being controlling and unsympathetic to his mental health needs. He said I was putting too much pressure on him during an already difficult time, that I should be more understanding about his process of figuring out his next steps. That's when I gave him an ultimatum. I said he had two choices: become a house husband and actually contribute to our household while I went back to work full-time, or we were getting divorced. I couldn't continue being the sole financial provider while also handling all domestic responsibilities, so he could have unlimited free time to contemplate his future. Paul chose option 1, but it was clear he resented it. He agreed to handle household tasks, but every conversation about it felt like I was forcing him into something he hated. He acted like I was being unreasonable for expecting him to contribute equally to our partnership. For about 2 weeks, Paul made a half-hearted effort. He'd do the bare minimum of housework, usually poorly and with a lot of complaining. He'd cook dinner maybe twice a week and act like he deserved praise for basic meal preparation. He treated every domestic task like it was beneath him, and he was doing me a huge favor. Then came the moment that made me realize this arrangement was never going to work. I came home from a long day at my new job to find Paul's mother in our kitchen, doing our dishes and organizing our pantry. I was completely shocked, because Paul hadn't mentioned anything about his mother coming over. When I asked what was going on, Paul explained that he'd asked his mother to help out because the housework was overwhelming him. I was furious. We'd agreed that he would handle domestic responsibilities in exchange for me supporting us financially. Instead, he'd outsourced his obligations to his mother without even discussing it with me. He'd found a way to avoid the responsibilities he'd agreed to take on. When I confronted him about this, Paul said he was struggling with the transition and needed support. He claimed that having his mother help was temporary, just until he got into a better routine, but I could see what was really happening. Paul had never intended to actually become a house husband. He'd agreed to it to avoid divorce, but then immediately started looking for ways to get out of his commitments. He wanted someone else to handle the housework so he could continue his extended vacation from adult responsibilities. The final straw was when I realized Paul's mother was planning to keep coming over indefinitely. She'd started bringing groceries, doing our laundry, cleaning our bathrooms. Essentially, she was doing all the work that Paul had agreed to do, while Paul continued playing video games and hanging out with friends. I told Paul that his mother could no longer come over to do our housework. If he'd agreed to be a house husband, he needed to actually do the job himself. That's when he admitted what I'd suspected all along. He'd never really intended to handle domestic responsibilities. He'd been hoping I'd get frustrated and just go back to supporting him financially while he figured out what he wanted to do with his life. We had another massive fight where Paul accused me of being inflexible and unsupportive. He said I was making his job search harder by adding pressure and stress to his life. He claimed that if I really loved him, I'd be more patient with his process and more willing to support him during this difficult transition. But I finally understood that there was no transition happening. Paul had gotten comfortable being financially supported while contributing nothing to our household. He'd convinced himself that his emotional well-being was more important than basic adult responsibilities like earning money or managing a home. I'm now in the process of filing for divorce. I can't be married to someone who expects to be financially supported while refusing to contribute anything meaningful to our partnership. I can't respect someone who thinks his comfort and freedom are more important than our shared responsibilities and financial security. The hardest part is that Paul still doesn't understand why I'm leaving. He genuinely believes that I should be willing to work full-time, handle all domestic responsibilities, and financially support him indefinitely while he takes as much time as he needs to figure out his life. He sees my expectations as unreasonable rather than recognizing his own entitlement and selfishness. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. I'm 33M and I'm honestly not sure if I'm losing my mind or if the situation in my house has gotten as inappropriate as it feels. My wife Lisa and I have been married for 6 years, and we have a 3-year-old son. About 8 months ago, we took in Lisa's best friend Anna after she escaped what was genuinely an abusive relationship. Anna is 29, and she'd been with this guy for 2 years who seemed normal at first but gradually became controlling and violent. Lisa noticed bruises on Anna's arms during one of their coffee dates, and when she pressed for details, the whole horrible story came out. The guy had lost his job and started drinking heavily, became paranoid and accusatory, eventually started hitting Anna when she tried to defend herself or leave the house without his permission. The breaking point came when Anna ended up in the emergency room with a concussion after he shoved her into a wall during an argument. Lisa and I rushed to the hospital, and when we saw Anna sitting there with her head bandaged, looking absolutely broken, we immediately offered her our guest room for as long as she needed it. I want to be clear that I supported this decision completely. Anna had nowhere else to go. Her family lives across the country and isn't particularly supportive, and she was clearly traumatized by what she'd been through. We have a 4-bedroom house and 2 spare rooms, so space wasn't an issue. I told Lisa that Anna could stay with us indefinitely while she got back on her feet. For the first few months, Anna was exactly what you'd expect from someone recovering from abuse. She was quiet, kept to herself, had frequent crying spells, barely left her room some days. She'd startle at loud noises, flinch if someone moved too quickly near her. All the classic signs of trauma. Lisa was amazing during this period, essentially becoming Anna's therapist and support system. Gradually, Anna started improving. She began coming out of her room more, helping with household tasks, playing with our son occasionally. She started seeing a therapist, began looking for work, seemed to be healing from what she'd been through. I was genuinely happy to see her recovery and proud that Lisa and I had been able to provide a safe space for her to rebuild her life. But somewhere around the 6-month mark, I started noticing changes in Anna's behavior that made me uncomfortable. It started small. Anna began waking up at the same time I did, around 5:30 a.m. At first, I thought it was just insomnia or anxiety from her trauma, but she'd come downstairs right after I did, offer to make coffee, want to chat while I prepared for my day. She said her therapist had told her that establishing routines was important for her recovery. Then she started asking about my gym routine. Anna said her therapist had recommended exercise as part of her healing process, and she wondered if she could join my gym and maybe work out together sometimes. I thought this seemed like a healthy step forward, so I added her to my membership and started taking her with me 3 or 4 times a week. The gym sessions were fine at first, but I noticed Anna would always want to use equipment near me, would ask for help with exercises she probably could have figured out herself, would make comments about how much stronger and more confident she was feeling thanks to my guidance. Then came the physical contact. In her culture, apparently, it's normal for friends to hug and kiss on the cheek as greetings. Anna started doing this with me every morning when we had coffee together, and again when I'd come home from work. Lisa never seemed bothered by it. And honestly, I didn't think much of it at first, but the hugs started lasting longer. The cheek kisses became more frequent, sometimes happening multiple times during conversations. Anna would find excuses to touch my arm when she was talking, or pat my shoulder when she thanked me for something. The conversations became more personal too. Anna would ask about my work stress, want to know about my relationship with my parents, ask about my hopes and dreams for the future. She'd share intimate details about her own life, her fears, her plans for when she got her own place. It felt like the kind of deep, bonding conversations you'd have with a very close friend. But something about the timing and context made me uneasy. Then Anna started making comments about my marriage. Nothing directly critical of Lisa, but observations about how hard Lisa worked, how tired she always seemed, how much responsibility she carried. She'd say things like how lucky Lisa was to have such a devoted husband, how not all women appreciated what they had, how some people took their partners for granted. Helping someone shouldn't cost you everything, but some people are experts at making you feel guilty for having boundaries. Anna had this way of framing everything as gratitude and recovery progress, which made it difficult to question without feeling like I was being paranoid or unsympathetic to someone who'd been through genuine trauma. The situation escalated about a month ago, when Anna started asking more directly about my marriage. She wanted to know if Lisa and I were happy, if we ever fought, if I felt supported and appreciated. She'd make comments about how she could tell I was stressed, how I seemed to carry so much responsibility, how she wished she could do more to help me relax and feel valued. Anna also began staying up later, often being awake when I got home from evening work events or late meetings. She'd be in the living room watching TV, and she'd invite me to join her for a drink and conversation about my day. These talks would go on for hours sometimes, with Anna being an incredibly attentive listener, asking thoughtful questions, making me feel heard and understood. I started looking forward to these conversations, which should have been a red flag. Anna was providing emotional support and validation that I wasn't getting from Lisa, who was often exhausted from work and parenting. Anna made me feel interesting and appreciated in ways that my marriage had been lacking lately. The turning point came 2 weeks ago when Anna told me she'd started looking at apartments. She said she was finally ready to live independently again, that staying with us had given her the stability and confidence she needed to rebuild her life. But instead of feeling relieved that she was making progress toward independence, I felt disappointed. I realized I'd gotten used to Anna's attention, her presence in my daily routine, her emotional support and validation. The thought of her leaving made me understand that our relationship had crossed some invisible line from houseguest recovery to something that felt dangerously like emotional intimacy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how Anna made me feel, how she listened to me in ways Lisa didn't anymore, how she appreciated things about me that Lisa took for granted. I was forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that I was developing feelings for Anna, or at least enjoying her attention in ways that weren't appropriate for a married man. I also started questioning Anna's motives. Looking back at the past few months, I wondered if her recovery had involved deliberately inserting herself into my life and routine. The early morning coffee chats, the gym sessions, the late-night conversations, the increasing physical contact. All of it could be seen as a gradual campaign to become indispensable to me. Lisa mentioned to me last week that Anna had a history I didn't know about. Apparently, years ago, Anna had gotten involved with a married coworker, an older man, who told her his marriage was basically over and that he was planning to leave his wife. Anna had believed him and carried on an affair for over a year before discovering he had no intention of leaving his family. Lisa had helped Anna through the aftermath of that relationship, which was part of why she'd been so quick to offer support during the current crisis. Learning this made me see Anna's behavior in a completely different light. Her focus on my marriage satisfaction, her comments about Lisa taking me for granted, her gradual escalation of physical and emotional intimacy, all of it seemed like the behavior of someone who had experience pursuing unavailable men. I don't think Anna is consciously manipulating the situation, but I think she's unconsciously repeating patterns that worked for her in the past. She's using her trauma and recovery as cover for gradually inserting herself into my marriage and testing my boundaries. The problem is that her strategy is working. I am attracted to Anna. I do enjoy her attention, and I am tempted by the emotional connection we've developed. If I'm being completely honest, there have been moments over the past month where I've fantasized about what might happen if she stayed permanently, if Lisa and I grew apart, if Anna and I acted on the tension that's been building between us. But I also know that this is exactly how affairs start. With someone vulnerable who needs support, gradual boundary violations that feel natural and justified, emotional intimacy that fills gaps in a marriage, and eventually physical intimacy that feels inevitable rather than chosen. I need to end this situation before it goes any further, but I'm not sure how to do it without looking like I'm abandoning someone who genuinely needed help. Anna hasn't technically done anything wrong, and if I'm misreading her intentions, I'll look like a paranoid husband who can't handle helping a friend without sexualizing the situation. Sometimes the most progressive voices can become the most oppressive when taken to extremes. I'm 30F and I honestly don't know if I'll ever recover from what my brother did to me. We've been incredibly close our entire lives, closer than most siblings. and what happened 3 months ago has completely shattered my understanding of who he is and what our relationship meant. My brother Alex is 31M, and we've always been inseparable. People used to joke that we were like twins, even though he's a year older. We talked on the phone almost every day. We had matching tattoos. He walked me down the aisle at my wedding since our dad died when we were young. I named my first child after him. Our bond was the foundation of our family, and everyone knew that if you messed with one of us, you'd have to deal with both of us. About 18 months ago, Alex started planning his wedding to his fiancée Marcus. They'd been together for about 4 years, and I was genuinely happy for them. Alex asked me to be a groomsman, which I thought was a little unusual since his best friend would typically fill that role. But I was honored and excited to be part of his special day. The planning process was intense. Alex called me every day with wedding details, asking for my opinion on everything from flower arrangements to menu selections. I spent hours helping him make decorations, driving around town to look at venues, basically treating his wedding like it was my own second wedding. I didn't mind at all because I could see how important this day was to him. There was one thing that bothered me during the planning, though. Alex's best friend Derek, who was serving as best man, and the rest of the wedding party seemed to have this weird dynamic where they'd exclude me from group decisions. They'd shoot down all my suggestions for shoes or accessories, making snide comments about my choices being too flashy or inappropriate. When I'd propose something, Derek would immediately suggest the opposite, and everyone would agree with him. It felt like classic mean girl behavior, honestly. There was definitely an in-group, and I was clearly not part of it. I chalked it up to the fact that they all lived in a different state and knew each other better than they knew me. I decided to just focus on supporting Alex and making his day as perfect as possible. The week before the wedding, I flew out to where they were having the ceremony. That's when I discovered that Derek had organized a bachelor party the night before I arrived. Everyone from the wedding party had been included except me. When I asked Alex about it, he just shrugged and said it had been a last-minute thing. I was hurt, but I didn't want to cause drama so close to the wedding. The wedding day itself was beautiful. Alex had chosen a fantasy theme with elaborate decorations, and since it was a child-free event, I ended up being the flower fairy, complete with wings that I'd handmade. I was actually proud of how I looked and how the whole ceremony came together. I gave a heartfelt speech during the reception about how much Alex meant to me and how happy I was to welcome Marcus into our family. Everything was going perfectly until the drag show. About halfway through the reception, there was a scheduled drag performance, which was completely in character for Alex's celebration style. But during the show, one of the performers made an announcement that stopped my heart. She cheerfully told the audience that this whole wedding was actually fake because Alex and Marcus had gotten married for real a year earlier. The worst betrayals aren't just about being lied to. They're about discovering that everyone you trusted was complicit in the lie. As I looked around the room, I realized that every single person in the wedding party already knew this information. Every guest who mattered to Alex was in on the secret. The only person who had been left in the dark was me. I sat there trying to process what I'd just heard while the room continued celebrating around me. A year ago, they'd gotten married a year ago, which meant Alex had been lying to my face every single day since then. All those phone calls about wedding planning, all the stress and excitement he'd shared with me, all of it had been performance. Then I started remembering other things. A year ago, Alex had been at the hospital when I gave birth to my youngest child. He'd held my newborn baby just 3 days after secretly getting married and said nothing. We'd had countless conversations about his relationship with Marcus, his fears about marriage, his hopes for their future together, and the entire time he'd already been married. My mother was sitting next to me, and when I asked if she knew, she was just as shocked as I was. She immediately got upset, not just about the deception, but about the money she'd contributed to this fake celebration. She'd given them $3,000 to help pay for what she thought was their actual wedding. I tried to keep it together for the rest of the reception, but I was falling apart inside. When Alex and Marcus tried to pull me aside to explain, I told them I'd talk to them later and that they should enjoy their evening. I couldn't handle a confrontation in front of all their guests who apparently knew more about Alex's life than I did. The next morning, Alex tried to explain himself. He said he hadn't meant to hurt me, that the original plan had been to tell everyone eventually, that they'd only kept it secret because they wanted to have a big celebration later. But every word out of his mouth made it worse. He'd planned this deception for an entire year. He'd watched me spend thousands of dollars on travel, accommodations, outfits, and gifts for what I thought was his wedding. He'd let me pour my heart into helping plan an event that was essentially a very expensive party to celebrate something that had already happened. When I confronted him about the timeline, about all the conversations we'd had while he was keeping this massive secret, he just said he hadn't known how to tell me. He claimed he'd been planning to explain everything after the celebration was over, as if that would somehow make the year of lying acceptable. The part that broke me was realizing that Alex had been living a double life that I wasn't part of. For a year, he'd been married, had been building this new phase of his life with Marcus, had been making major decisions and having experiences that he didn't share with me. Meanwhile, I thought we told each other everything. I ended up leaving early and cutting off contact with Alex immediately. I blocked him on social media, stopped answering his calls, and made it clear to my family that I was done with him. Some relatives thought I was overreacting, that I should be happy for Alex regardless of the timing or circumstances. But they weren't understanding what this felt like from my perspective. This wasn't just about the fake wedding. This was about discovering that my closest relationship was built on a foundation of lies. If Alex could deceive me about something this fundamental for an entire year, what else had he been lying about? How many other major life events had he hidden from me? How long had he been capable of looking me in the eye and completely fabricating his reality? 3 months later, Alex still hasn't really apologized. He's made some half-hearted attempts to reach out, but always with the attitude that I'm overreacting and that his deception wasn't that serious. He doesn't seem to understand that he broke something irreparable between us. The hardest part is that I'm mourning someone who's still alive, the brother I thought I knew, the relationship I thought we had, the trust and intimacy that defined our bond for 30 years. All of that is gone. I have to accept that either Alex was never the person I thought he was, or he's become someone completely different and I just didn't notice. I've been going to therapy to try to process this loss, and my therapist keeps asking what it would take for me to consider reconciling with Alex. The honest answer is that I don't think anything could repair this. Trust isn't something you can rebuild after it's been destroyed this completely. My family keeps hoping we'll work things out eventually, especially with the holidays coming up. But I can't pretend that this was just a misunderstanding or a mistake. Alex made a calculated decision to lie to me every day for a year about one of the most important events in his life. That's not something you do to someone you truly love and respect. The relationship I thought I had with my brother is over. Maybe someday I'll be able to have some kind of superficial connection with Alex, but the deep, trusting bond we used to share is gone forever. He destroyed that when he decided his comfort was more important than my right to know the truth about his life. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones hiding the biggest secrets. I'm 23F, and I feel absolutely terrible about what happened with my best friend Kayla, but I also don't know if I was wrong for finally speaking up. We've been best friends since we were 11, and she's been there for me through some really tough times. I've always been able to count on her, and I thought she could count on me too. Kayla has been with her boyfriend James for just over 2 years now. At first, I actually liked him. He seemed good for her, made her laugh, and she was genuinely happy. But for the past year and a half, literally every single conversation I have with Kayla revolves around complaining about James. I'm not exaggerating when I say every conversation. She'll call me or we'll hang out, and within 5 minutes she's launching into some story about how James did this wrong thing or said that insensitive comment or forgot some important detail. She tells me intimate details about their relationship that honestly make me uncomfortable, like their sex life problems or gross habits he has that she finds disgusting. The thing is, I've been giving her advice this entire time. I've listened for hours, offered suggestions, tried to help her work through whatever the latest crisis was. But she never takes any of my advice. Ever. I'll suggest she talk to James directly about an issue, and she'll say that won't work. I'll recommend they try couples counseling, and she'll make excuses about why that's not realistic. I'll ask why she doesn't just break up with him if she's this miserable, and she'll give me reasons why she can't leave right now. It's gotten to the point where I dread spending time with Kayla because I know the entire experience will be her venting about James while I provide free therapy that she completely ignores. She's also changed so much since being with him. She used to be adventurous and fun, always planning trips or trying new things. Now she barely leaves her house and talks about wanting to settle down and have kids by the time she's 25. It makes me sad because she's lost that spark that made her so exciting to be around. What really pushed me over the edge was my birthday dinner last weekend. I'd been looking forward to it because I'd just gotten my dream job and wanted to celebrate with my closest friend. I picked a nice restaurant, made reservations, was excited to actually talk about my life for once instead of constantly focusing on her relationship drama. But from the moment Kayla sat down, she started complaining about James. She spent the entire meal telling me about their latest fight, going into excruciating detail about things he'd said and done wrong, analyzing every aspect of their argument like it was the most important thing in the world. I kept trying to change the subject, to tell her about my new job, to talk about literally anything else. But she'd acknowledge what I said for maybe 30 seconds before launching back into James' drama. I realized she hadn't even asked how I was doing or shown any interest in what was happening in my life. Real friendship sometimes means saying the hard truths that others won't. I'd been holding back my frustration for months, trying to be a supportive friend, but watching her turn my birthday celebration into another therapy session about her toxic relationship finally broke me. After we finished eating, I'd had a few glasses of wine, and I was feeling emotional about the whole situation. I told Kayla that I didn't want to hear about her shitty boyfriend anymore. I said that everything I advised her to do, she just ignored, and I had nothing left to say to her about James. I told her she should dump him if she hates him so much, and if she's not going to dump him, then she needed to quit bitching about him all the time because I didn't want to hear it anymore. I said I was tired of our entire friendship revolving around her relationship problems when she clearly had no intention of actually fixing anything. Kayla looked hurt and shocked. She tried to defend herself, saying she didn't realize she was complaining so much. But I was on a roll at that point. I told her that she'd made my entire birthday dinner about her boyfriend, that she never asked about my life anymore, that I felt like I was just an emotional dumping ground for her relationship frustrations. The conversation got heated, and Kayla ended up leaving the restaurant upset. I paid for both our meals and sat there feeling terrible about how I'd handled the situation, but also relieved that I'd finally said what I'd been thinking for months. That was 5 days ago, and Kayla hasn't spoken to me since. I sent her a text the next morning apologizing for my delivery and asking if we could meet up to talk about things more calmly. She hasn't responded. I've been going back and forth about whether I was completely out of line. On one hand, I know I was drunk and probably said things more harshly than I needed to. I could have brought up my concerns at a different time, in a more gentle way, when I wasn't frustrated and emotional. On the other hand, I'd been bottling up these feelings for over a year. I'd never told Kayla that I was tired of hearing about James constantly, or that I felt like our friendship had become one-sided. Maybe if I'd set those boundaries earlier, in a calm conversation, we wouldn't have gotten to this point. The truth is, I do love Kayla, and I want her to be happy. But I'm exhausted from being her unpaid relationship counselor while watching her ignore every piece of advice I give her. I'm frustrated that she's lost herself in this relationship with someone who clearly doesn't make her happy. And I'm hurt that she seems to have no interest in my life or what's going on with me. I keep wondering if I should have just continued being patient and supportive, letting her vent as much as she needed to without complaining. Maybe that's what good friends do, even when it's draining and repetitive. Maybe I was being selfish by expecting our conversations to be more balanced, but I also think about how our friendship used to be. We used to talk about everything. not just her relationship problems. We used to support each other through different challenges, not just focus on one person's issues constantly. I miss the friend who was interested in my life and excited about my successes, not just someone who used me as a sounding board for the same complaints over and over. I'm worried that I've destroyed our friendship over something that maybe I should have just accepted as part of who Kayla is right now. All our mutual friends have basically dropped her because they can't deal with the constant James complaints either. So I'm one of the few people left in her life who will listen to her. Maybe walking away from her makes me just as bad as everyone else who gave up on her. At the same time, I don't think I can go back to the way things were. I can't pretend to be interested in hearing the same relationship complaints when I know she's not going to take any action to improve her situation. I can't keep being the friend who gives advice that gets ignored while my own life gets treated as unimportant background noise. I wrote Kayla a letter a few days ago, apologizing for how I spoke to her, but also explaining how I'd been feeling about our friendship lately. I told her I love her and want the best for her, but that I need our relationship to be more balanced. I said I'm here for her when she's ready to make real changes in her life, but I can't keep being her therapist for problems she won't actually try to solve. I haven't sent the letter yet because I'm not sure if it's the right approach. Part of me thinks I should just apologize without conditions and try to go back to how things were. But another part of me knows that wouldn't be sustainable for me emotionally. The timing of truth can be just as devastating as the truth itself. I'm 19F and I honestly don't know if I'm going crazy or if what happened to me was as messed up as it feels. I'm a college freshman and I've been part of this really tight friend group since orientation. We're all pretty diverse, which I love. And we spend a lot of time talking about social justice issues, politics, cultural appropriation, all that stuff. We're all pretty left-wing and usually agree on most topics. So these discussions are usually really productive and educational. I should probably mention that I'm white, and most of my friends are people of color. I've always been conscious about that dynamic and tried to listen more than I talk during conversations about race and discrimination. I know I have privilege, and I try to be aware of it. Here's the thing though. I have naturally very curly hair. Like, extremely curly. It forms this big, round, puffy shape around my head that honestly looks like what most people would call an afro. I'm not exaggerating or trying to be dramatic about this. My hair texture is just naturally very tight curls that create this spherical shape when it's not braided or pulled back. I've had this hair my entire life. When I was little, my mom didn't really know how to take care of it properly, so it was always kind of a frizzy mess. I spent most of middle and high school either straightening it constantly or wearing it in tight ponytails because I didn't understand how to work with my natural texture. It wasn't until I got to college that I started embracing it and wearing it naturally. Last week, we were all hanging out in the common room, having one of our usual discussions about cultural appropriation. The conversation had started because someone mentioned seeing a white girl at a party wearing what looked like a protective hairstyle, and that led to a broader discussion about non-black people appropriating black hairstyles. I was mostly just listening and nodding along because this isn't really my area to speak on. I agree that cultural appropriation is problematic, and I understand why certain hairstyles have cultural significance that shouldn't be trivialized or stolen by people outside that culture. But as the conversation went on, I started feeling like people were looking at me weird. Not like normal conversational eye contact, but like they were examining me, glancing at my hair and then away, then back again. I have social anxiety, so at first I figured I was just being paranoid. Then my friend Jasmine made a comment that made my stomach drop. She said, and I quote, "It's so weird when white people try to have afros. Like, we can all see what you're doing." The room got really quiet, and everyone was definitely looking at me now. I felt my face get hot because I realized they were talking about me and my natural hair. I tried to explain that this is just how my hair grows out of my head. I don't do anything to make it this way. I don't use products to create texture or volume. I literally just wash it and let it air dry, and this is what happens. But instead of understanding, my friends doubled down. They started saying that I should straighten my hair because wearing it naturally was contributing to racial tension. and making people think it's okay for white people to appropriate black hairstyles. Jasmine said that when people see me, they might think it's acceptable for them to get perms or use products to create similar texture, and that I was basically giving other white people permission to appropriate. Marcus chimed in saying I should be more conscious of how my appearance affects the broader conversation around cultural appropriation. He said that intent doesn't matter as much as impact, and that the impact of me wearing my natural hair was harmful to black people. I was so confused and hurt. These are people I trust and respect, and they were telling me that my natural appearance was problematic and offensive. They were asking me to chemically alter my hair to make other people more comfortable. When someone shows you they'll sacrifice your well-being for their image, believe them. What really got to me was that these friends, who I thought cared about me as a person, were asking me to damage my hair and spend hours of my life maintaining a look that wasn't natural for me. Also, they wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable seeing a white person with very curly hair. I tried to push back gently. I said that asking me to straighten my natural hair seemed like it was crossing a line, that I shouldn't have to chemically process my hair just because of how other people might interpret it. That's when things got really ugly. Jasmine accused me of being defensive and not caring about how my choices affected marginalized communities. Marcus said, I was prioritizing my personal comfort over the harm I was causing to black people. Even my friend Aisha, who I thought I was closest to, said that she'd been feeling uncomfortable about my hair for months but hadn't known how to bring it up. She said that every time she saw me, it reminded her of white people who fetishize black features while simultaneously discriminating against black people who have those same features naturally. The whole conversation felt surreal. I was being lectured about cultural appropriation for having the hair that grows out of my own head. They were treating my natural appearance like it was a political statement or a costume choice. I ended up getting really upset and saying something I probably shouldn't have. I said I'm sorry I was born this way, and my voice was louder than usual because I was frustrated and hurt. The reaction was immediate and harsh. Several of my friends looked disgusted. Jasmine said I was being dramatic and centering myself in a conversation about racism. Marcus said my response proved that I wasn't really committed to being an ally. They all left pretty quickly after that, and I've been basically ostracized from the group since then. Some of them will still say hi when they see me around campus, but the close friendships are clearly over. I've been doing a lot of research since then, trying to understand their perspective and figure out if I was wrong. I found some information about white people with naturally textured hair, and apparently it's more common than I thought, especially among people with certain European ancestries. I also learned about hair care specifically for very curly hair, and I've been trying different products and techniques that are designed for my texture. It's actually helped my hair look a lot healthier and more defined, which has made me feel better about wearing it naturally. But I'm still really confused about the whole situation. I understand the concept of cultural appropriation, and I would never intentionally appropriate someone else's culture or make light of their experiences. But I don't understand how having naturally textured hair counts as appropriation when I'm not adopting anything from outside my own genetics. Part of me wonders if my friends had legitimate concerns that I'm just not seeing because of my privilege. Maybe there are impacts of my appearance that I'm not aware of or understanding properly. But another part of me feels like they crossed a line by asking me to alter my natural body to make them more comfortable. The idea that I should straighten my hair to avoid being associated with cultural appropriation seems really problematic to me. I've been feeling isolated and confused ever since this happened. I lost my main friend group over something I can't change about myself, and I'm not even sure if I was right to stand up for myself or if I should have been more understanding of their concerns. I keep going back and forth between feeling like I did nothing wrong and wondering if I'm just too privileged to see the harm I might be causing. It's been really difficult to navigate this situation without any guidance from people I trust. When someone shows you they'll sacrifice your well-being for their image, believe them. These stories remind us that the most devastating betrayals often come wrapped in the language of love, family, and commitment. Tonight, we've witnessed relationships crumble under the weight of unspoken expectations, hidden resentments, and the simple human failure to see our partners as separate people with their own needs and boundaries. What strikes me most about these tales is how many could have been prevented with honest communication and genuine respect. The husband who accused his wife of murder rather than facing his grief. The mother and fiancé who built their affair baby into a family lie. The friend who demanded natural hair be chemically altered to fit an ideology. Each story shows us how quickly love can transform into control, how support can become manipulation, how the people closest to us can become the most dangerous to our well-being. As you drift off tonight, remember that setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's necessary. Supporting someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself completely. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from someone who refuses to meet you halfway, who demands you change your natural self to accommodate their comfort, or who treats your well-being as less important than their own convenience. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the darker corners of human connection. If these stories have kept you company through another sleepless night, consider subscribing for more late-night explorations into the stories that reveal who we really are when everything falls apart. Until next time, this is Sleepless Miner, reminding you that even in our worst moments, we're not alone in the darkness.